and all peoples on the world, specifically in Southeast Asia, forget about what happened in Palestine. That's why the webinar is so crucial, significantly to us to remember what happened in the Palestine, like the bombing, torturing, like killing, and the other. And I hope all speakers give us about information, perspective, and whatever in that. And if we see all participants, this is highly enthusiast, not only I said before, not only from Southeast Asia, teenagers, not only from students, but from older people, young people, from NGO, INGO, from government, in, in not only in Southeast Asia, maybe just from me, and I hope all participants can enjoy our webinar and give us a good questions and good response and good statement. And we stay and we have to support freedom in the Palestine. Thank you. Assalamualaikum. Afternoon. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Aprilian Cena, for the meaningful welcoming remarks. We will now proceed the introduction of speaker and the main panel discussion. At this point, I will hand over the session to our moderator, who will introduce our distinguished speaker and guide us through today's discussion, guide reflection, and interactive dialogue session. We encourage all participants to stay engaged and prepare their question for the discussion. To our moderator, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, MC, and thank you, Mr. Sena, for setting the tone for today's dialogue. So, good afternoon once again, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Daniel Tandio Bambuna, or you can call me Daniel. I'm from Research and Development Division, IPF 2026. As mentioned earlier, today's session is not designed as a conventional webinar where we simply listen to presentations. Instead, this dialogue encourages all of us to learn from different experiences, perspectives, and reflect together throughout the discussion. It is now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Muslim Imran, Director of the Asia Middle East Center. Dr. Imran has extensive experience in research and policy discussions related to the Middle East and international affairs. So let's begin our conversation today. Maybe I want to greet Dr. Imran. Are you here? Hello, Dr. Imran.
Yes, I'm with you. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. How are you, Dr. Imran?
Alhamdulillah, good. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we can start the conversation now. The floor is yours.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for having me. Regards to IPF, the organizers of this webinar, and to everyone present here today. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight very briefly the root cause of the Palestinian problem, the Palestinian issue, and how it has been approached by Southeast Asian countries and what can be done in the future. So the first issue I would like to highlight is the root cause of the Palestinian issue. For many people, when they look at the news coming out of Palestine, they see the bloodshed, of course, the war, the destruction. They see a conflict. Many see two warring parties, armies clashing, and questions that arise is how to describe what's going on in Palestine. Okay, the question that arises is how best to describe what's happening in Palestine. If we are to compare the situation in Palestine to the situation in Ukraine, for instance, or to the situation in Cambodia, Thailand a few months ago, or to the situation in between the US and Iran right now, we will be mistaken to think that the situation in Palestine is just another war like these other wars. A war will have two warring parties, two armies. two powerful entities clashing. Sometimes there are, of course, differences in the capabilities, but it will usually have two armies fighting each other. The situation in Palestine is more of a settler colonial occupation. That is a little bit different. And the difference here is very significant because it can shape our understanding of the entire development. The settler colonial situation is a situation where one group of people tries to dominate and exterminate another group of people in order to take their land and their properties. A very similar situation is what happened in North America when the white European settlers moved from Europe to America, especially in North America, but also in some parts of South America. The mission was to kill and force out as many people as possible in order to take their land, properties, and resources. Unlike, for instance, the Dutch occupation of Indonesia, which sought to rob resources. The Dutch wanted to steal Indonesia's resources. They killed Indonesians, they committed crimes, but their main purpose was not to wipe out the entire Indonesian population. Their main purpose was to steal the resources. Settler colonial occupation is a little bit different in this sense. In North America, in Australia as well, in Canada, for instance, the white settler colonial forces that arrived wanted to steal the land and to get rid of the local population. And that's why we don't see many Red Indians today. The natives of North America have become history. They were wiped out by the European invaders. The same applies to Australia. Not many aborigines still exist until today because the white European settlers wanted to construct a totally new reality with more land and less people. In South Africa, a similar model was implemented, but it failed. Today, Israel is actually tracing the same models and trying to implement it in Palestine. The settler colonial European Zionist communities that moved from Europe and other parts of the world seek to get rid of as many Palestinians as possible and to steal as much land as possible. It started in the late 19th century, and it started to get organized with the establishment of the Zionist organization in 1897 in Switzerland, in Europe. Eventually, the Zionist movement that was leading the efforts to establish a settler colonial entity in Palestine made some deals with global powers, the British, the French, and eventually the American empire, and started migrating to Palestine and building up its capabilities. By the year 1947, these Zionist settlers started a war of annexation. They call it War of Independence, but it was practically a war of expansion. They were, quote unquote, guests in Palestine. These Zionist settlers, immigrants, and refugees were persecuted. Some of them were persecuted in Europe by the Nazis. Some of them came for economic reasons, and some of them came for ideological reasons. Eventually, all of these Zionist European settlers organized themselves politically and militarily, established groups, military groups like the Haganah, Stern, Lehi, and others, and set up economic facilities, set up even academic institutions in Palestine, like the Hebrew University, the Jewish National Fund, the Jewish Agency, etc. And by the time they felt strong enough, and by the time the British decided to end their occupation of Palestine, the Zionist movement decided to move forward. In November 1947, the Zionist militias took advantage of the United Nations partition resolution, which decided to partition Palestine between the original Arab native inhabitants and the settler Jewish communities that were in Palestine. The United Nations position was very shaky because it's a new organization that has no mandate over Palestine. It, however, decided to interfere and to help the British end their colonial occupation of Palestine by deciding to split Palestine between two groups, and partition plan moved forward. The Israeli Zionist settlers established the state of Israel and committed atrocities and ethnic cleansing throughout the next 1 year or so. These Zionist militias started what Israeli historian calls the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Israeli historian Ilan Pape has documented this in many of his writings based on Israeli declassified documents from the 1947-1948 war. So to best characterize the situation in Palestine, it's not just a conflict. It's not a confrontation between two equal armies or bodies. It's a settler colonial occupation. The only way to end a settler colonial occupation is to completely break this system of occupation, to end the migration of more Israeli settlers to Palestine, to end the system, the economic system that facilitates the existence of Zionism in Palestine, and to help the Palestinians get back to their homes and to establish their life again. In 1947, 1948, more than 700,000 Palestinians were forced out of Palestine. These refugee communities have moved around for the last almost 8 years. By now, there are more than 7 million Palestinian refugees living across the world. Many of them live in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt, which are next to Palestine. But many, many others are scattered across the world. In North America, there are almost 500,000. In South America, there are almost 500,000. In Europe, another 500,000. Even in Malaysia and Indonesia, there are a few thousand Palestinian refugees. These people were forced out and they keep relocating. Whenever there is a problem in the recipient country, they end up relocating again. So when Palestinian refugees in Syria and in Iraq witnessed an ongoing war, civil war in both countries, they relocated to many other countries. Some of them moved to Asia, some of them moved to Europe and elsewhere. For the refugees to end their problem, they have to go back to Palestine. That's the only solution, actually, not the best solution. That's the only solution for Palestinian refugees. The 7 million Palestinian refugees have to relocate back to their homes in Palestine. But in addition to these refugees and the refugee problem, there is an ongoing problem inside Palestine now. 1.5 million Palestinians still live under Israel and have Israeli citizenship, but they are considered second-class citizens. Very minimal rights. Another 4 million Palestinians, 2.5 in the West Bank and 1.5 in Gaza, or almost 2 in Gaza. These 4.5 million Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank are being persecuted in different ways. A system of apartheid has been installed by Israel over the years. In 1948, 1947, and 1948, Israel was established as a new state. But instead of living in peace with its neighbors, Israel continued to annex other territories and expand. 1956, they attacked Egypt. 1967, they occupied the West Bank and Gaza in Palestine, and occupied other territories like the Golan Heights of Syria, Sinai of Egypt, and other territories. In 1982, they invaded Lebanon and occupied South Lebanon all the way until Beirut. So their expansion continued, but eventually they left some of the territories they occupied, like the Sinai Heights, and maintained others like Gaza, West Bank, and Golan Heights. This new Israeli expansion imposed a system of apartheid on the local populations. They couldn't get rid of as many people as possible like they did in 1947, 1948. So instead of killing and forcing out as many as possible, they installed a system of apartheid. Apartheid means separation. The Jewish Israeli settlers have a special legal system, a special economic system and privilege. The Palestinian Arabs have a lesser position. Palestinian Arab, be it Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. The Palestinian population, of course, is diverse. The Palestinian people have coexisted for centuries in peace in Palestine. There is a Muslim majority, but there is a sizable Christian community that continued to practice his faith since the time of Prophet Jesus. And there is a small Jewish community, Samaritan Jewish community living in Palestine as well. They they consider themselves Palestinians because they are Palestinians who speak Arabic and have been living there for thousands of years. There are also other smaller communities like the Druze, Baha'is, and others. So Palestinians of all sects and faiths have been subject to the Israeli colonial system. Some of them were forced out as refugees. Some of them were locked in their own country as prisoners in a system of apartheid. One of the worst experiences the Palestinians had was the experience in Gaza. In 2005, the Israeli army pulled out Gaza but maintained a system of embargo or sanctions on Gaza. They locked Gaza and made it as what the Israeli journalist Yuri Abniri called or said, the biggest open-air prison in the world. It was practically a prison. Gaza is not a very big territory. It's about 365 kilometers square. The Israelis pulled out of the Gaza city and strip and locked it out. So going in and out of Gaza was a complicated, task. Water supply, electric supply, energy supply is completely controlled by the Israelis since the year 2005. Food coming in, exports going out, people coming in and out, medical journeys and trips, everything is controlled by the Israeli military. So throughout these 20 or 22 years, the Palestinians tried to establish whatever system of sovereignty they managed to do. In 2006, Palestinians had elections. Hamas was elected. It won majority in both the West Bank and Gaza. But differences between the president, who is from another political faction, President Mahmoud Abbas from Fatah, and the prime minister, the late Ismail Haniyeh from Hamas, these differences could not be resolved. By the year 2007, the system split, and we ended up with two different administrations. One in Gaza, run by Hamas, elected in 2006. One in the West Bank, run by President Mahmoud Abbas, who was himself elected in 2005. So the legitimacy of the Palestinian political system was subject to a strain and tension. However, the Palestinians in both places and on both political sides continued to struggle, sometimes diplomatically. So the Palestinian state was, a recognition of the Palestinian state was pushed in the United Nations, and the Palestinian state was recognized by more than 120, and the number continued rising, especially throughout the past 3 years of genocide. It's now at least 157 international recognition of the state of Palestine, and I think it's probably more than the number of states recognizing Israel. At the same time, the Palestinian resistance in Gaza decided to build its capabilities to defend the Gaza Strip. Yes, there was an embargo and sanctions. You cannot go in and out easily, but the Palestinians are very skillful people. They started to develop their own means of resistance, all sorts of means of resistance, be it weapons, food, construction materials, etc. By the year 2023, after 18 years of blockade and sanctions and pressure on Gaza, the Palestinian resistance in Gaza thought that it's time to break this stagnation and this colonial system. So they took out an initiative and attacked Israeli military sites on October 7, 2023. Before trying this military approach, the Palestinians in Gaza tried so many other approaches. For instance, in 2018, they started something called the Great Return March. They demonstrated at the borders with Israel for more than a year. Every Friday, especially Friday, thousands of Palestinians would demonstrate in front of the borders. And what Israel's response was, they assigned their snipers different sites, and they were shooting Palestinians like there is no tomorrow. More than 180 Palestinians were killed and thousands were injured. At least 16,000 Palestinians were injured throughout this 1 year. So Palestinians tried a peaceful attempt. In the West Bank, there were a lot of peaceful efforts, protest after protest. In one of the civilian peaceful demonstrations, Palestinian minister Ziad Abu Ain was shot dead by the Israeli military. So the Palestinians thought that if a peaceful protest is not going to work, we have to think of other ways. And Al-Aqsa flood or the October 7 attack was one of the approaches they attempted to take. Now, this continued all the way until 2023, when the Palestinians started their military operation. Israel took this as a pretext to start its campaign of ethnic cleansing again. Let's remember that Israel was established through a campaign of ethnic cleansing. In 1947, 1948, Israel was built upon ethnic cleansing and genocide. In 2023, they wanted to complete that mission. We figured out and we realized that there were plans discussed already by the Israeli cabinet, maybe back in 2017, on how to transfer the Palestinian populations out of Gaza and the West Bank. And Israel took this Palestinian attack as a pretext to start their own military campaign. They were not interested in a war. They were not interested in a military confrontation. They were interested in a genocide. And over the last 3 years, Israel continued a severe campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide, documented very well by many international organizations. Today, humanitarian and international human rights groups like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and others have officially documented Israel's attacks and consider it to be a genocide. Israel's main human rights groups like B'Tselem have also published reports describing this as a genocide. The Israeli group actually published a report saying our genocide, saying that Israel is committing a genocide. Later, eventually, the international community came to acknowledge this, and South Africa went to the ICJ, International Court of Justice, and sued Israel for the crime of genocide. And the court has not finished its proceedings yet, but issued a warning to Israel very early on not to invade the city of Rafah, saying that there is a plausible case of genocide against Israel. Today, most of the international genocide experts in academia acknowledge what's going on in Gaza as a genocide. And Israel's genocide continued for more than 2.5 years. But Israel was not satisfied. They did not win a military battle because the Palestinians continued to fight back, but they tried to create reality on the ground by transferring more than 1 million Palestinians from North Gaza to South Gaza. They tried very hard to force out everybody out of Gaza, but Egypt wouldn't open the borders and the Palestinians wouldn't leave their homelands. Eventually, the Israelis started to expand their settler colonial regime by attacking Lebanon, and they continue to occupy villages in the south of Lebanon and continue to carpet bomb villages and cities in the south of Lebanon, hoping to expand their land and territory to the entire south of Lebanon. They could not accept any resistance or any challenge from other regional bodies or countries, and we saw Israel bombing throughout the last 2 years in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, of course, and most recently in Iran. In Israel's perspective, Israel's war criminal Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thinks that the best way to thrive and stay in power is through military chaos. So if the war in Gaza finished, if the war in Lebanon finished, he is more than willing to start a war in Syria or Iraq, or as we have seen in Iran. He started a military campaign in Iran, in which he dragged the United States, and they started the military campaign by killing the supreme leader of Iran. You just imagine another country bombing the president or the king of their neighbor and starting a war of destruction. On the very same day they started their war in Iran, they bombed a school called Minab, killing more than 160 school kids. So wrapping up this introduction, sorry if it was a lengthy one, Israel is a settler colonial regime. There is no way to make peace with a settler colonial regime. A settler colonial regime should be dismantled. Apartheid should be dismantled. Apartheid and genocide and ethnic cleansing should not be tolerated. So when it is a settler colonial regime, the best way out is to dismantle and end this regime. That's why the responses of the different countries across the world matter. It's very important how we respond to this genocide. Some countries, before the Israeli genocide started in 2023, were thinking that the best way to pressure Israel is through diplomacy. Some countries boycotted Israel in international forums like Indonesia, Malaysia, and others. Some countries thought that the best way is through supporting the Palestinian resistance. This is what Iran, for instance, has done, Sudan, Yemen, and others. Some countries thought the best way is to engage Israel. This is, of course, a big mistake. Some countries like the Abrahamic Accord countries thought that the best way is to talk to Israel, try to persuade them to become peaceful and to probably end the ongoing conflict in Palestine. Morocco, UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan, I think, signed a peace accord with Israel called the Abrahamic Accord during the COVID period. But eventually, Israel felt with this kind of peaceful, quote unquote, peaceful arrangement with its neighbors, it does not have to settle the Palestinian problem. So Netanyahu started to be ambitious. He thought that I can make peace with other countries while ignoring the Palestinians. Palestinians are a local problem that I will handle myself. So he started to extend bridges to build a peaceful relationship with countries that boycott Israel, including Malaysia, Indonesia, and many other Muslim countries. But many of these Muslim countries continue to restrain themselves from normalization with Israel. Eventually, after the American campaign on Gaza, the full support of the Israeli campaign in Gaza, the Palestinians decided that it's time to end this genocide. So resistance was very, very heroic, but it wasn't enough. And after 2 years of negotiations in October 2025, we were finally offered a ceasefire that ends the war. I mean, it was the first time in 2 years that the Americans and the Israelis offer a clear proposal that they will end the war in Gaza in return for about different demands, a 20 points plan by President Trump. The Palestinians did not have the Trump plan was a horrible, terrible plan, but the Palestinians did not have the ledger to negotiate at that point of time. They wanted an end for the ongoing genocide and mass killing, and they wanted a peaceful settlement. So the Palestinian resistance accepted to release all the Israeli prisoners in exchange for a start of an Israeli ceasefire where humanitarian aid comes to Gaza and Israel pulls out of Gaza. But having known Israel for decades, the Palestinians were not very confident that Israel will fulfill its terms. Eventually, the Palestinians released the Israeli prisoners, and thousands of Palestinian prisoners were also released from Israeli jails. Also, there are thousands still left behind bars. But yeah, one part of the deal was done. The next part was allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza and Israeli military pulling out of Gaza. It was never implemented. Until today, Israel continues to occupy more than 60% of the Gaza Strip. Israeli military is still inside Gaza. But at least for the Palestinians, the genocide was somehow toned down. If you remember, in 1 or 2 days of the war, there used to be mass killing of 500, 600 Palestinians a day. For now, the numbers, it still matters, of course, but the numbers are way less. Every day, 2, 3, 4, 5 people are being killed. Since October last year until now, about 1,000 Palestinians were killed. So to conclude, the responses of different countries matter. Those countries that choose to support Israel's policy with Israel are compromising the Palestinian future. That support the Palestinian resistance are, of course, ahead of everyone else. But if any country is not able to support the resistance, at least they should not be on the side of the Israelis. Back to Trump's peace proposal, one of Trump's articles or plans was to establish something called the Board of Peace, which is supposed to oversee the peace in Gaza. Unfortunately, since the establishment of the Board of Peace all the way until today, the Board of Peace has been unable to observe peace in Gaza or to maintain peace in Gaza. It was more concerned about raising funds from different countries and controlling the international system rather than helping the Palestinians or even the Israelis for that sake to achieve peace. The Board of Peace was more interested in business plans for Trump and his cronies and his family. So, to conclude, my hope in Southeast Asia is that countries like Indonesia, especially Indonesia, the leader of ASEAN and the largest country in the region, and Malaysia, as well as other peace-loving countries like Thailand, the Philippines, and others. My hope is that none of these countries will facilitate Israel's agenda by accepting a normalization of relations. Countries like Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia do not have any diplomatic relations with Israel. It should stay this way. And if they start to accommodate the Israeli foreign policy and Israeli propaganda, that means they are actually switching sides. The best policy is to maintain the ongoing restraint from dealing with Israel. The other countries like Thailand, Singapore, Philippines, and others who already have political relations with Israel, our hope is that diplomatic relations will not extend to other forms of cooperation and normalization. It will not include cultural cooperation or security coordination and other dealings with Israel. Israel is a genocidal regime that has committed ethnic cleansing, that has conducted a campaign of mass killing. It should not be welcomed in the club of civilized nations. Today, in the 21st century, the world has seen so much development and civilization. It should not tolerate a criminal regime like the Israeli regime. This regime should be dismantled. Peace should prevail in Palestine for everyone, for Muslims, Christians, and Jews, for Arabs, and everyone. But the only way to achieve it is to dismantle this apartheid system called Israel to end its regime. Thank you very much, and sorry for the lengthy presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Imran. I think your explanation has given us a very important foundation for today's discussion. You mentioned several points like the settler colonial and then the historical context of this Palestinian and Israel issue. So thank you very much. It's a very important foundation for our discussion, especially in helping us to be better in understanding the broader context surrounding Palestine. Okay, now we'll continue with our second speaker. Our second speaker is Ms. Astrid Nadia Rizkita, President of OICYouth Indonesia. She has actively encouraged meaningful participation among young people in issues affecting the Muslim world through her work with youth engagement and international collaboration. Maybe Ms. Astrid? Hello?
Yes. Am I audible?
Okay, you're audible. Hey, you may proceed.
Great. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, of course, I'd like to thank the IPF or the International Politics Forum for inviting me to this dialogue. And even though our representatives have engaged with IPF with similar topic in the past few sessions, topic that is very important and close to our hearts, which is the cause of Palestine. And second is also because today's session is not like formal lecture, but in the form of a dialogue, in the form of a conversation. Because I believe that the Palestinian issue is not to be discussed from a distance, as if it's something that is separate from us. Because this is something that is really related to us in terms of our conscience, in terms of our sense and understanding of justice for those who truly understand what is humanity and justice, and of course our responsibility as young people of Indonesia. Actually, a lot of points have been covered by Dr. Muslim Imran. He has mentioned about the chronology, about the history, about the Palestinian cause, even up to the recent, as well as the BOP, the Board of Peace, and many other things. And he underlined a very important matter, which needs to be kept in mind for us as young people of Indonesia, for us as part of the actor international relations based on the mandate of our law. In 1999, law number 37. International relations is not only the state, but also, there's the private sector, there's the civil society, there's this NGO, academia, and even each and every one of us as Indonesians. Dr. Imran mentioned important point about keeping in mind that normalization, right, approaching being friendly with Israel is won't solve the Palestinian cause. It will just further exacerbate it. It will further create the divide that is already there, and it's related. Very important for us to have this sense of worldview, for us to have the sense of the accurate how history is really is. And we see day by day how not only in the Muslim world but in the Western world, even in the West, people are waking up and more and more are supporting Palestine. How we see the massive support for the global Sumut flotilla. Maybe last year it was different, but this year it's more and more people in support and highlighting it. And before I begin further, let me highlight and mention something that is very current as we gather today in this forum, in this dialogue, right? Right? How we let's say vouch for or even root for certain national teams. It's a once in 4 years event, celebrating sports, celebrating shared passion for football. And we may be rooting for national teams, including teams from the Islamic world, right? But let's not forget that at this very same moment, as we speak right now, we must also remember Palestine. We also must remember the thousands of Palestinian youth, young men, children, students, and athletes who have dreams, and they are cut short by the occupation. And let's not forget that also recently, the Palestinian goalkeeper, Salim Khadir al-Ashqar, he was killed by Israel forces. And I think this is where our reflection, our dialogue should, also continue from. Celebrates football, we turn the other eye, to turn the other cheek when we hear about, the current occupation, as if it's something that is, nothing that we can do about it. But it's not right, because what does it mean that, on the other side of the world, there's the Palestinians, not only footballers, but also children, young people, and people in general are being denied even the simple right to live and to live as they should. And in Indonesia, I think we have to draw a line, right? The stance of the government and the stance of the people. Also recently, we see even from the response of the Indonesian government, in which they supposedly already sent an official representative to attend the funeral of the late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, by appointing the ambassador of Indonesia in Iran to attend the funeral. But no official delegation from coming all the way from Indonesia to Iran, even though the other Islam mentions as the 8 countries, namely there's Saudi Arabia, even Qatar, even Malaysia, right? Not Malaysia, but other countries who are part of the BOP, right? Even Azerbaijan, they sent official delegation to Iran, right? All the way from their country, but none from Indonesia. This was also highlighted by scholars and also foreign policy experts and enthusiasts. Also recently highlighted by Dr. Dino Patijalal, in which let's not forget that Indonesia has a policy of free and active policy, or free and independent foreign policy, in which we do not abide by a certain bloc, be it the West Bloc or the Eastern Bloc. Back in the days of the inception of the concept of the free and active policy by Muhammad Hatta. Nowadays, in this era of multipolarity, actually, what is being done by other Islamic world countries, as well as even Pakistan, the PM attended the funeral, and other figures as well. So there's something that needs to be addressed in terms of the stance of Indonesia, and the IPF for this session also highlighted important points to be addressed in this dialogue, as well as how we view this issue from our body of work. So by means of, or by ways of introduction, I currently serve as the president of OICYouth Indonesia, and most of our work has been related to youth diplomacy, the OIC related engagement with its bodies, international cooperation for young people to understand global issues. And let's not forget that the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which was named Organization of Islamic Conference when it was founded. It was founded in 1969. One of the reason to be is the Palestinian cause, right? Due to the arson of Masjid Al-Aqsa. So, we have to, again, understand it very thoroughly, that it's not only a symbolic issue, it's not only a seasonal issue, it's not only something that, we advocate for just because, but we have to keep in mind, also at the top of our mind, that understanding of Palestine is shaped by our constitution. In the preamble of constitution in Undang-Undang Dasar 1945, in which the independence is the right of all nations, and all forms of colonialism must be abolished. So we speak as Indonesians regarding Palestine is from our constitutional identity, our anti-colonial history, and we have a long history related to that, and our commitment to international law, and in large, our moral responsibility as part of the Muslim world and the global South. So it shouldn't be a jargon. And even though in the diplomatic spaces, right, there's been many critiques of the effectiveness of the multilateral system, which there is, But Palestine is always the Palestinian cause is always present in the OIC spaces. We see it in the countless resolutions in the clauses, always referring to past UN resolutions, the OIC resolutions. And let's not forget that, back in 2012, Indonesia was one of the countries who co-sponsored the resolution of the UN, which admits Palestine as one of the observers, as finally the observer of the UN, which is a big gap still, because back in 1948, Israel was already a full-fledged member of the UN. And actually, we have very high hopes that the current administration, right, we calculated and well thought steps regarding the how Palestine can be full member of the United Nations. So back in 2012, it was the era of President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and Foreign Minister Martina Talagawa, and years have passed, and challenges still persist, and we cannot just stay in the same place as we are, or even worse, bandwagon what other countries are doing. Whereas again, we have the moral compass, we have the constitutional compass of how we should act. And from the perspective of us as OICYouth Indonesia, we again advocate for this as part of civil society, as mandated by our law regarding foreign relations. And what we have been discussing in Indonesia right now, also our seniors at the Indonesia Ulama Council, who have spoken regarding the Palestinian cause, also they and part of small team who you know formulated kind of you know how the yeah, am I audible now? So yeah, allow me to continue with Israel also eventually in Iran, which was also one of the countries that is actively against US and Israel. Eventually the Indonesia Ulama Council tried to give input to the government that there is more harm than there is benefit of staying in the Board of Peace, not only for Indonesia position, but also the Islamic world at large. So again, let me emphasize that bebas aktif, the principle of free and active foreign policy, does not mean that we are morally neutral, right? It doesn't mean that Indonesia should be passive, but it means that Indonesia should not be subordinated by any bloc, but should be active in shaping peace and again realizing peace. And for Palestine, actually, it means that Indonesia should be independent in terms of its foreign policy, to speak clearly and active enough to mobilize and to, again, just like what we did in the past few years, like in 2012 with the Palestine as observer as the UN, in which Indonesia co-sponsored the resolution. Also, how Indonesia convened and hosted the Islamic Summit on Palestine. It was back in 2016 during the presidency of President Joko Widodo. So far, Indonesia should do more because we believe that especially our current president, he seems to be a very hands-on international issues, but we need to actively remind and give input in our capacities as young people, as Indonesians, about how we are actually conducting our foreign policy. And the previous speaker before me, Dr. Imran, mentioned very eloquently regarding the how Palestine is understood. And yes, Southeast Asia, when we speak about ASEAN, it's a very still a diverse region. We thankfully have the ASEAN way, right? But also the current countries that do not have any diplomatic relations with Israel, namely Malaysia, right? Namely Brunei and Indonesia. I think it should remain as it is. We must maintain it because, you know, it's part of the Muslim world. And also, we have a strong anti-colonial history. This region very suffered from, you know, the colonialism. So we should always, you know, have strong people-to-people solidarity. And regarding the two-state solutions, let ask a deeper question. And I'll just use this for the last minute. That when we were struggling for independence, as Indonesia especially, would we have been satisfied, or would we have been okay with that if someone told us, allow colonial structure to remain around us? It's not like that, right? So again, when we are against Zionism, it doesn't mean that we are, against, we are, let's say anti-Jew, something like that. It's a totally different thing. Because again, when we look at history, and even Dr. Imran mentioned that Zionism and apartheid, it has a similar root. It's very similar, and it's also a form of colonialism, and we are totally against that. Let's not also forget, if it's not bad enough, let's also not forget how the parliament, right, enacted the death penalty law for Palestinians, who are convicted and in prison. So it's also against humanitarian, and even human rights. So by us being aware of issues, and we have strong roots in our knowledge in terms of human rights, no angle can justify us like supporting the occupation of Palestinian by the Israelis. So with that, I think I'd like to end my intervention. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Atrit, for your presentation, for your explanation. You highlight several points regarding the basis of our Indonesia's constitution, on how Indonesia actively participate and involved in supporting Palestine. There's something that we did from a long time ago and persistent until today. You also mentioned about civil society participation, which is a good point that maybe we can implement, since we are civil society here. And we can do a small step to support the Palestinian fight to freedoms. Okay, moving on, our third speaker is Ms. Revda Selver, PR and Media Executive at Friends of Palestine. She brings valuable professional experience in advocacy, media communication, and public engagement regarding Palestine. Ms. Revda, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Assalamualaikum.
Okay, you may begin.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's truly a privilege to be part of this conversation with the Political Forum. So basically, I will share my experience with the Palestinian cause and some of the issues I have been facing while working in Southeast Asia. So when people ask me what first drew me into the Palestinian cause, I always say that my journey began with my family. As a child, my parents often spoke to us about Palestine from a very early age. And because of their work, they traveled extensively and were exposed to different communities and humanitarian issues. So conversations about justice, displacement, and human dignity were very common in our household. I also personally come from Bosnia, a country whose people endured genocide and ethnic cleansing. Although I did not grow up there, my family's history gave me a deep appreciation for what it means to lose lives, homes, and security, and why preserving identity and dignity matters. So that perspective made the Palestinian story resonate with me from a very early age. As I grew older, the empathy evolved through education. I began studying Palestinian history, listening to Palestinian voices, and engaging directly with advocacy initiatives. Through that process, I realized that Palestine is not only a humanitarian issue, as it was mainly covered and framed in the media. It is fundamentally a question of justice, human dignity, and the universal right of people to live freely in their own homeland. So today, I serve as the PR and media executive at Friends of Palestine Network. Our work is often misunderstood. While humanitarian assistance is very important, Friends of Palestine primarily focuses on advocacy, education, training, and strengthening the Palestinian narrative in Southeast Asia. We believe meaningful solidarity begins with knowledge. That is why we invest in media literacy, advocacy training, public education, and building networks across Southeast Asia. In my role, I have had the opportunity to work with academics, journalists, content creators, youth organizations, NGOs, policymakers, public figures, and influencers, all to promote informed discussions about the Palestinian cause. We organize forums, media campaigns, and training programs that help people communicate about Palestine accurately, ethically, and effectively. So perhaps the most meaningful part of my work has been meeting Palestinians and listening to their stories firsthand. Those experiences reinforce an important lesson, that Palestinians should never simply be the subject of our advocacy. They should be always at the center of it. So our main responsibility as people who stand with Palestine is not to speak for them, but to help amplify their voices and ensure that their story, their history, their identity, and lived experiences are understood to the rest of the world. So one of the questions I'm often asked is what I think people misunderstand most about Palestine, particularly in Southeast Asia. So I believe one of the biggest misconceptions is that Palestine is simply a humanitarian crisis. So when we frame Palestine only through the language of aid and emergency relief, we unintentionally strip away political, historical, and human dimensions from this cause. So Palestine is not merely a place where people need assistance and war aid. It is a society with a rich history, rich culture, institutions, and people who have consistently asserted their right to self-determination. So humanitarian support is still essential, but humanitarianism alone cannot explain why the crisis exists or even why it still continues. So I will encourage people to think carefully about the language that we use when we talk about Palestine. We often hear terms like conflict or cycle of violence, which can suggest two equal sides engaged in the same struggle. Yet many Palestinians describe their own reality through the lens of occupation, displacement, and the denial of fundamental rights. So we as individuals understanding the distinction changes or understanding these different words that we should use actually changes how we interpret the events and why they are unfolding in Palestine. So here in Southeast Asia, public solidarity with Palestine is incredibly strong. And that is something to celebrate and be proud of. But I believe our solidarity can become even stronger when it is grounded by education or in education. Rather than asking only how can we help Palestinians, we should also ask how do Palestinians want their story to be understood? And I think that's a question we have been overlooking for a very long time. Ultimately, advocacy is not about changing people's minds. It is about changing the lens through which people see Palestine. Once that lens changes, the conversation becomes far more informed, far more educated, and far more meaningful. Through this work, I've learned that advocacy is a marathon, not a moment. Public attention rises through crisis and fades when the headlines disappear. And I think currently, or for the past year, we have been in this area when it comes to the genocide happening in Gaza. So it's out of the headlines, also out of the minds. Statistics are important, yet it is personal experiences that build empathy and inspire action. So that is why amplifying authentic Palestinian voices remains at the heart of everything we do at Friends of Palestine. Working in public relations has taught me another valuable lesson. Communication is not simply about delivering information. It's about shaping the understanding. So the way we frame an issue influences how the people respond to it. Accuracy, context, and ethical storytelling are just as important as the passion we have for the cause. Finally, I often get asked what young people can realistically do beyond raising awareness. So my answer is simple. Awareness is the beginning, not the destination. Young people today have unprecedented access to information, global networks, and digital platforms. That gives them tremendous influence, but it also comes with responsibility. Supporting Palestine is not simply about sharing emotional content online. It's about becoming informed enough to communicate responsibly, challenge the misinformation on the social media, and contribute to a more accurate public understanding of the issue on the ground. One of the greatest contributions young people can make is by using their professions and talents to support Palestine. So, for example, a journalist can report ethically, a graphic designer can create educational campaigns, a filmmaker can tell stories that humanize the Palestinians, lawyers can advocate through international law, researchers can provide evidence-based work, teachers can educate future generations, while entrepreneurs can build ethical partnerships and sustainable initiatives. So every profession has a role to play for Palestine. We all don't need to be activists in order to be active or support Palestine. I also hope that today young people will invest in building institutions and communities, not just online campaigns. Social media movements are powerful, they are important, I'm not arguing, but they are often temporary. Lasting impact comes from creating organizations, educational programs, research initiatives, and networks that continue long after a hashtag stops trending on social media. So above all, we must continue to center Palestinian voices, Palestinian story. Genuine solidarity means asking, how do Palestinians want their story to be told? Our role is not to replace their voices, but to help create spaces where they can be heard and understood. I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Real change doesn't come from doing everything. It comes from each of us asking, What skill do I have? And how can I use them in service of justice? When enough people answer that question with commitment and consistency, awareness becomes action, action will become lasting impact, and solidarity becomes something that truly makes a difference in our world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Revda, for your insightful explanation. You mentioned about how we frame a issue, the importance of framing, and then communication is how do we understand. And you mentioned about small things that we can do in our daily life, like how we're using social media to spread the information, but we have to know the understanding of the issue of the Palestine. So everyone can involve in their role, like if you're a graphic designer, if you're a multiple roles, and unfortunately, social media is powerful but temporary. So we have to uh, have a lasting move to make sure that this message can be last for a long time. I think that's very interesting, and we have to put the Palestine in the center of the information, but not just advocacy. Okay, thank you very much for that very insightful information. Now, everyone, we have heard some information and explanation, three different perspectives. Maybe you can start to think in your mind how to connect this information before we're going to the breakout rooms. And I think now we'll move on into our breakout discussions. Please wait as the committee will put all of you to breakout rooms. Each room has a facilitator who will help you to guide the conversation. During the next 30 minutes, we'd like each group to discuss three guiding questions. At the end of your discussion, we'd appreciate if your group could prepare one key insight, one recommendation, and one practical action that young people in Southeast Asia can drastically take. Most importantly, we encourage everyone to participate actively and respectfully. Don't forget to use English in your discussion. We'll see you back here in about 30 minutes, so enjoy the discussion, everyone. Okay, welcome back to the main session, everyone. I've been following for brief discussion of this group with their own point and conclusion. I hope you have meaningful discussions in your respective rooms. Right now, I would like to invite the representative from each room to present the ideas, thoughts, and your reflection during the breakout discussion. Maybe we can start from room one. Room one, you can present your conclusion or your reflection. Hello, room one.
Okay, I would like to discuss our presentation. Okay, so there's a couple questions that actually conclude. First, which speaker's perspective resonated most strongly with your group? So the conclusion of the forum is actually most of them explain that Mrs. Astrid actually gave the it's actually the speakers that strongly with have the full impact on our group, because Mrs. Astrid uses English with Indonesia so they could understand better. And for the second question is what new understanding emerged from today's dialogue? So from our discussion, what is our conclude is actually that Palestine conflict isn't about just Palestine, but it's all about all of things, like let's say like school or the impact. There's a lot of impact, but there's a pretty good idea, which is to create a good environment. Indonesia, let's say Indonesia as the leader of Asian, we could share a scholarship to the Palestine kids that, let's say, that currently struggle with school and with the environment right over there. And that's the second question to answer. So the third question is what challenged your previous assumption. So the third question is how can Southeast Asian YEL translate this understanding into meaningful engagement? So this is the last question. So the answer is from economic. This is actually quite have an impact. So they suggest that the Board of Peace could recreate the rule, which is they could give gave a impact not only to Israeli but also Palestine. So I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. That's a conclusion from room three, right? It's very insightful, and maybe we can take that as a suggestion that we can do. Okay, let's moving on to room two. You may present your conclusion or your reflection. Room two. Okay, please go on. Kak Amalia. You can speak now.
Okay, since Kak Amalia cannot be on mic, maybe I can represent my group too. So for our group too, that we felt that Dr. Muslim Imran and Revda Selver delivered the perspective that resonate the most with our group, as Dr. Muslim Imran helped us understand that the Palestine issue is much more than the military conflict. It is also involve historical, political, economical, and also social dimension. While Revda, meanwhile, remind us that Palestine should not be seen only as a humanitarian issue, and that everyone, regardless of their background or professional, can contribute to the raising awareness and supporting justice. So our biggest takeaway for our group is that we should not become indifferent or treat this issue lightly. Instead, we need to understand it critically, recognize the complexity beyond what is often portrayed in the media. That's all from the group 2 result discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Kak Amalia, maybe you want to add something? Kak Amalia, you want to add or is it okay? Okay, maybe we should moving on to so room 3 has present their ideas. Maybe we can go back to room 1. You can present your conclusion and your thoughts. Room 1, please. Yeah. Okay, Christy, you may proceed. You're still muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So, I'm representing my breakout room. So, for the first question, which speaker's perspective resonate most strongly with your group? So, from the discussion earlier, the speaker that resonate most with our group discussion is the first speaker, Dr. Muslim, and the third speaker. Why? Because on the Dr. Muslim spoke of the point that I highlight from his material with that Indonesia should keep the non-diplomacy act of this palace between Israel, because we already have no diplomacy with Israel right now, and that is already good. So we should keep it that way. And as for the third speaker, the one that I highlight most is regarding how social media is not the only way that we can uh, give awareness regarding what's going on Palestine, but we can also start in a real life, maybe organization, NGO, or institution, and such as that. For the second question from our group discussions is that what new understanding of Palestine emerged from today's dialogue is that the point that I can highlight most from all three speakers is that um, is it what's going on in Palestine? It isn't a religious issue anymore, but this is about humanitarian issues, and that we should take actions more and not look into people's background. But this is about humanitarian issues, and we shouldn't line ourselves with the fact, oh, this is a religious issue. It's not a religious issue anymore. This is about humanitarian issues, and uh, we should act about it instead of only speaking about it on social media is not enough. And as for the third question, how can South Asian youth translate this understanding into meaningful engagements? So from the discussion in the breakout room earlier, I spoke of an NGO, and I am also a part of NGO regarding for refugees in Indonesia. And I think NGOs can be the first step and can be the key to the conflict going on right now, and the first movement that the youth in Southeast Asia can do right now. And if you don't have enough resources to do volunteers, you can also do so by educating yourself more with more information on what's going on right there, and instead of just maybe just relying on social media on what's going on, because sometimes some information can be a hoax or it can be a misinformation, and we shouldn't just um, swallow it like that. We should actually learn from the reliable source and information and educate yourself. And then after we educate ourselves, we can also educate the people around us, like our friends, our family, and in hopes that it can also be spread it can spread more awareness around this. And that is from our group. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, number one, for your inclusion, for your reflection. You highlight several points from our speaker segments before. Thank you very much. Maybe we can move to room 4. You can present your thoughts, your ideas. Okay, please, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. Good good afternoon. Good afternoon, guys. I'm from representing group 4. There are two of our breakout discussion will say about, oh, I'm sorry, Kak Ahmad Uliani. His mic is not on. Maybe anyone. Okay. I'm sorry. Just me. Okay. I'm sorry before. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm representing Group 4. So our group resonate most with the perspective shared by Miss Revda as last speaker and Dr. Muslim Imran as first speaker because they encourage us to look beyond the humanitarian dimension of Palestine. Miss Revda emphasized that media framing often shapes public misunderstanding of Palestine, while Dr. Imran argued that the issue should also be understood through the perspective of settler colonial occupation that different from classic colonialism and structural injustice. Together, these perspectives help us to think more critically about the root causes of the conflict rather than only we know that Palestine issue just as humanitarian consequence. So one important insight from our discussion is that humanitarian assistance alone cannot explain the root causes of the conflict or provide a long-term solution. As we know, this Palestine issue is a really long-term issue, and we also recognize the important role of media in shaping public understanding, highlighting the need for greater media literacy. So, as youth in judgment, our group believes that Southeast Asian youth can contribute by strengthening media literacy, promoting informed discussion, or supporting humanitarian initiatives, and also making ethical decisions based on credible information and their own values. And the last our group also discussed about that some participants maybe most feel ethical consumer choice like boycott product from Israel that the gain or the profit when we buy a product of Israel can make Israel more genocide to Palestine. So this is our real action as youth Southeast Asian. And our key insight is that building shared understanding requires looking beyond headlines and addressing both humanitarian concerns and question of justice. And the last, the recommendation is about educational institutions should create more opportunities for dialogue, education, and cross-cultural exchange on global humanitarian issues that help young people understand complex international issues from multiple perspectives. Like we know, want to minimize misinformation to discuss about the issue. That's all from our group breakout discussion 4. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Group 4, for your reflection and your thoughts. Well, I can see that all of groups had absorbed any information and insight from the speaker. So it can be seen where each group highlighted some of the information that the speakers gave before. And I would like to invite each of our speakers to share one brief closing reflection, and if they have any responses to your reflection and thoughts. But since Dr. Imran and Ms. Revda currently not in the room, maybe I would like to invite Ms. Astrid. Maybe you have responses or any comments to the group's reflection. Oh, seems like Ms. Astrid has left. Okay. Okay, everyone. Thank you for your participation during the discussion, and you have actively participate. I hope those conversations give you the opportunity not only to share your own perspective, but also to learn from one another. Um, as we conclude today's dialogue, I'd like to briefly summarize a few ideas that stood out. Today's discussion reminded us that understanding Palestine goes beyond headlines or political developments. It also requires listening to different experiences, appreciating diverse perspectives, and engaging in thoughtful conversations, not just a simply share a random post on social media or give some likes, but we have to move beyond and do something that is insightful to the society. Another important takeaway is that meaningful engagement doesn't always begin with large-scale actions. It often starts with a willingness to learn, to listen, and to engage responsibly within our own communities. Okay, maybe that's the conclusion for me. Does any one of you wants to share your own thoughts or your own reflections, your personal reflection based on what we have learned today? You may raise your hand if you want to share your reflection or your comments. Okay, seems there's no one wants to share their thoughts. Okay, that's fine. Hopefully, what we can learn today can be useful for your information, for your to gain your knowledge, and hopefully we can meet again in the near future. Um, Thank you, everyone. I will return the floor back to MC and see you again.
Finally, guys, okay, I will have the honor of closing this meaningful event. On behalf of the organizing committee, we extend our heartfelt thanks to all speakers, partner, facilitator, and participant for your time, contribution, and engagement throughout today's webinar. May this gathering strengthen our shared understanding of Palestine through Southeast Asian perspective and become part of our collective commitment to justice, humanity, and peace. Okay, thank you to the moderator, all distinguished speaker, facilitator, and participant for the insightful and constructive discussion. Oh yeah, before we continue to the final, we would like to invite all speakers, committee members, and participants who are able to turn on their camera for a group photo documentation. And please keep your camera on for a moment. So operator, kindly help us capture the documentation. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Please don't forget to claim your e-certificate as a token of appreciation for your participation. Thank you once again for being part of today's webinar. Jazakumullah khairan katsiran. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.